I'm curious for you, what has experimentation in your show been like? How have changes been received, not been received, and how have you tried to, bring what the audience wants into it? Because I think in the beginning, the hard part is we really don't know what they want, right? And so I guess, how have you handled a lot of that?
I mean, it's early on. It's for new podcasters. It's the 101 stuff because you come up with your questions and you got your questions in hand. You're like, okay, I'm going to get through these questions with this person, and you've got like maybe your 10, and then you quit. And I'm sure you've realized this as well. After the first couple, you realize this is not going to work because it either goes so quick that you answer your 10 questions and you still got half an hour to fill up, and you're like, oh, shit, I got to figure this out. But it was actually John Lee Dumas's because he gives, notoriously, he only gives you 30 minutes for his show, and you better get a slot. You can get a slot whenever you can manage it. And he's got this crazy intense like workflow where he does, last time I talked to him a couple of years ago, he does like 14 episodes in one day and then another 14 in another day. And
I've heard him talk about that. Like I remember like back in the days when I was really cranking out episodes and I was doing like 5 a week or 3 a week, like I would sit down and I had Fridays were my interview days. Yeah. And like I'd crank out like 7 interviews. And like I really didn't like people by the time I got through 7. So like I have no idea how he does that, man.
Well, that's the military background. He was in the Army. So he just kind of like hammered them out. And he's like, oh, in 2 days, I take care of my entire month's, progress or like output. But what was interesting is like, I don't have that much time. And I think it was in the middle of the day and I just showed up and I was just like a little bit nervous because it was like my 6th interview. And I looked at my questions. I was like, I'm not going to be able to get through these. So I just like put them down. I was just like, let's just talk, what's going on in your life and how's it going? And I really felt like that was a turning point for me to start realizing that they're not interviews, they're conversations. And it helped me build up and hone that muscle of just being naturally curious, asking open-ended questions, being comfortable with silence, and just being able to connect with that person on the other end of the camera. And then realizing over time that there's 3 people in a podcast conversation, the host, the guest, and the listener. And it's always listener singular. Like there's one person listening to us at this time. They've got their earbuds on, going for a run, going for a walk. And so I'm always conscious of that relationship. And I always wanted to feel like, you and I are having a chat in a bar, and someone just pulls up a stool and just kind of listening into us. And it's always, for me, once I had that realization, then it just became a matter of like, who's doing this really well? Like the Jordan Harbingers of the world, the Tim Ferrisses of the world. Like, what are they doing? What types of questions are they asking? And I'm like, oh, that was a great question. Like I would start to incorporate things. So just iterating over time. And I think that's why I keep my show going. It's not like crazy downloads, but it's me putting in the reps in. Like I have to keep coming in and I have to keep showing up. And every time a new person comes in, they come in with some fresh ideas and something that keeps me like on my game to make sure that I'm still being an engaging interviewer.
You know what I think is interesting, and I don't think he gets enough credit for it. I think Aaron Mankey's always done a great job in making the listener feel like they're the only person listening. Yeah. Because it is. I think people don't put enough importance on it, but it's really important, right? Yeah. Because you feel like somebody's having a conversation with you, whereas like when you're directing it to a group of people, you're likely directing it to no one.
Yeah. I think what I've noticed early on is people would come in from radio or people who do like public speaking, and they'd be like, "Hey everyone, it's my podcast." Like they're on stage, and also like we both have got the same mics here, and like if I move the mic away, like you lose that intimacy right away, right? But and just these little things that you learn over time, and that you're building an intimate relationship. I remember one time I went to a podcast movement, and it's a woman there who had been listening to my show, and she's like, "Oh my God, Harry, like I listen to you every time I before I go to sleep." And like she's like, my voice was so soothing that she would have it playing for me. And like her husband was there, and I was like, it's a little awkward, but that's cool.
I will tell you, that's been the biggest challenge for me because I listen to a lot of like sports shows, political, cultural shows and stuff like that. So like since this Roman Empire thing has kind of hit for me, is I'm actually like going on a lot of the shows I listen to. So like I know way more about these shows than any guest typically would know. Yeah. And you kind of have to balance out like not being a homer when you show up on the show. You know what I mean? Like I know way too much about these people. So this could be a little, you got to try not to fanboy. So I think that's